you can actually manipulate people to demand you do what you want to do anyway. So it works like this. First of all, you create the problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it.
Point of global threat. Poisoning of the air and of the principal sources of food and water supply is already well advanced, and at first glance would seem promising in this respect. It constitutes a threat that can be dealt with only through social organization and political power. But from present indications, it will be a generation to a generation and a half before environmental pollution will be sufficiently menacing on a global scale to offer a solution.
You then report that problem through the media in the way you want it reported, because the media is owned by the same people that own the banks and etc. You get the public to react to your problem by saying something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it?
You imagine that we live in an age of reason, and the global warming alarm is dressed up as science, but it's not science, it's propaganda.
There's no direct evidence which links 20th century global warming to anthropogenic greenhouse gases.
We're just being told lies, that's what it comes down to.
You can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
If the CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
The whole thing stinks.
Man-made global warming is no longer just a theory about climate. It is the defining moral and political cause of our age. Campaigners say the time for debate is over. Any criticism, no matter how scientifically rigorous, is illegitimate, even worse, dangerous. Everywhere you are told that man-made climate change is proved beyond doubt. But you are being told lies.
People say we don't believe in global warming. I say no, I believe in global warming. I don't believe that human CO2 is causing that warming.
A few years ago, if you would ask me, I would tell you it's CO2. Why? Because just like everyone else in the public, I listened to what the media had to say.
Each day, the news reports grow more fantastically apocalyptic. Politicians no longer dare to express any doubt about climate change.
There is such intolerance of any dissenting voice.
Are some of the worst climate criminals on the planet.
There were periods, for example, in Earth's history when we had 3 times as much CO2 as we have today, or periods when we had 10 times as much CO2 as we have today. And if CO2 has a large effect on climate, then you should see it in the temperature reconstruction.
In 2005, astrophysicists from Harvard University published the following graph in the official journal of the American Geophysical Union. The blue line represents temperature change in the Arctic over the past 100 years. And here is the rise in carbon dioxide over the same period. The two are not obviously connected, but now look again at the temperature record and at this red line, which depicts variations in solar activity over the past century as recorded independently by scientists from NASA and America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Solar activity over the last 100 years, over the last several hundred years, correlates very nicely on a decadal basis with sea ice and Arctic temperatures.
To the Harvard astrophysicists and many other scientists, the conclusion is inescapable.
The sun is driving climate change. CO2 is irrelevant.
In the 1970s, global cooling was the consensus.
He's not exaggerating. Take a look at this article from the LA Times in 1978. No end in sight to 30-year cooling trend in Northern Hemisphere. Or Time Magazine's big spread from 1974 asking, another ice age? Newsweek said global cooling evidence had begun to accumulate so massively that meteorologists are hard-pressed to keep up with it.
Just switch out warming for cooling, and they've written this before.
It's true. The hype has been steady. The only thing that has changed is the temperature of the catastrophe. Take a look at this headline from the New York Times in 1959 claiming a warmer Earth evident at the poles. But just 2 years later, in the same newspaper, we find this. Scientists agree world is cooler. Even in the mid-90s, the Times was talking about a frozen Earth. Except it wasn't the 1990s, it was 1895.
You get whiplash reading these things. My whole career has been going around saying the climate changes all the time. Get used to it.
All right, how about another co-star? It's the so-called hockey stick graph. This is the version shown by Al Gore. However, the original version used by the IPCC contained a wide margin of error not shown in an inconvenient truth. Inconvenient, huh? Critics say there's even more missing.
There are two factors that most climatologists think happened that don't seem to be included in it, which are the Little Ice Age, which is a very cold period that ended in the late 19th century, and the medieval warm period around 1000 or so.
Since the third UN report, for which this was the smoking gun, there's been a fourth UN report. Does anybody see a hockey stick in there anywhere? I can't see ya. It's not in there. Guess what? It's airbrushed out in classic fashion, and they don't even mention why it's not here. What hockey stick? I didn't see any hockey stick.
Clearly, I mean, these guys haven't seen the movie, right? Because any movie with charts and graphs this big, I mean, they've got to be right.
Now, here's one of Al Gore's favorite charts, comparing CO2 levels and temperature.
When there is more carbon dioxide, the temperature gets warmer. Look how far above the natural cycle this is, and we've done that.
We? Meaning you and me? I guess it looks pretty convincing. Gore assumes here that CO2 levels are causing temperatures to rise, but look, could it be the other way around?
We now know for certain that the temperature changes before the CO2. And one of the fundamental assumptions that Gore doesn't understand is that in the theory of global warming due to humans is the CO2 goes up, the temperature will go up. Well, the ice core record shows it's exactly the opposite.
Is saying that, okay?
Those who deny global warming are just flat out wrong.
Ellen Goodman from the Boston Globe wrote, let's just say that global warming deniers are now on par with Holocaust deniers.
People have decided you have to convince other people that since no scientist disagrees, you shouldn't disagree either. But that, whenever you hear that in science, that's pure propaganda.
Climate scientists need there to be a problem in order to get funding.
Africa has coal, and Africa has oil. But environmental groups are campaigning against the use of these cheap sources of energy. Instead, they say Africa and the rest of the developing world should use solar and wind power. Wind and solar power are notoriously unreliable as a source of electricity and are at least 3 times more expensive than conventional forms of electrical generation.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear. If we're telling the third world that they can only have wind and solar power, what we are really telling them is you cannot have electricity.
The environmental movement has evolved into the strongest force there is for preventing development in the developing countries.
We are being told, don't touch your resource, don't touch your oil, don't touch your coal. That is suicide.
And at that point, they, who have covertly created the problem and blame someone else, who've gleaned that reaction of do something, then offer the solution to the problems they have created.
The objectives of the EcoScan, well, the UN will end up with control over all the land, and ownership of the land will be held by the rich men. There is arising a crisis of worldwide proportions involving developed and developing countries alike, the crisis of the human environment. The process of compromise of national interests will, of course, have to take place. Gorbachev said in December 8, 1989, in a speech to the United Nations, the United Nations will be the controller of all the lands in the world through their various ecological, environmental, organizations that they are in the process of setting up. A debt for land swap is another part of it. The international bankers loan and control the monies to all the countries, and through interest have driven them into huge debt status. It's a perfect system. Because the eco-threat is now global, then obviously it can only be controlled by a global authority. And guess who that is? Why, of course, it's the United Nations.